point of your discussion here was more on the end application side, that as a regular, company, enterprise, startup, aspiring startup, right? How are ways in which we are seeing AI being used on a regular basis. And of course, you would have come across already, or you would be dabbling in, or deploying already. But I'll just spend some time in explaining how various functions within a corporation are being changed, which is all part of
Yep.
largely operations, right? So
Yes,
that,
I think that'd be fantastic.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think I would categorize broadly these AI interventions into two parts, right? One is simply redesigning operations because you now have a better interface either for the end user or for your own employees, because of the advent of LLMs and the end applications related to that, right? So this is one broad bucket. The second is redesigning the company itself totally uh, because AI is now very, very powerful, right? So I'll give you examples of maybe a simple example from my own personal experience, and then probably talk about some examples that I see outside, right? So the difference that now let's go to the two categories, right? Interface one, very simple. I'll explain in a bit. The core part where you redesign the company itself, use because AI has changed, right? Is only possible when AI is the core of what you do, right? Now, let's take an example. So we did a platform called GenY Labs. This was a consumer insights platform. We wanted to change the way market research is done globally, right? And we were using deep learning, but not LLMs weren't there at the time, right? They were just getting started. I think the transformer paper had just come and so on, right? So that was the era. So the idea was that we will just use a bunch of data, private and publicly available, and create signals which are relevant to marketers, right? So this used a bunch of models. So there was one model for detecting the demography of the user, what age he might be based on the language being spoken, what is the location, etc. Then you would gender based on name. Then you had sentiment models of whether he's happy, sad, angry, whatever, right? And then you would have, um, you know, some attribution that what is the root cause this consumer, he or she is sad because of poor customer care, a poor quality of product received, whatever it might be, right? So we created this bunch of models, all industry specific, right? Huge problem, multiple models, um, very relevant, right? A good TAM, etc. So we had learned our lessons from what we were doing, right? And so it was high complexity because you had to do individual models for every industry, multiple, almost an assembly line of model. So let's say a person would put in a complaint or call the contact center, and we would ingest that data in real time, translate it into the baseline language, run these assembly line of models of different types, and give some insight to the marketer in real time, right? So this was GenY Labs. If I were to do this business today, right, it would be much more simpler because I don't need this assembly line of multiple small models. There is one large models, one large model or assembly of two, three large models, which can do all of this very efficiently, cost efficiently, development efficiently, and give a much more enhanced outcome and insight to the marketer, right? So if I would redo this business, this would be completely different. I would architect it differently. I would, change everything about how we thought about it, right? So that is a category of business which needs to be completely rethought, right? Now let's overlay this example on various aspects of operation, right, in a company. And let's assume that, and we'll try to see if we can bucket it in category A, which is user interface, some process redesign, or complete rethink, right? So if I were to just start with things like strategy, let's say strategy, which I did, back at Ola, right? Or earlier, when, all startup founders need to do some strategy, right? So how would I think about it? There is no user interface per se. There is some, but more what analysts consume, right? It's a very creative function. You need to think, which is about things which are not there, which are coming, and so on. And a lot of resources and time go into consuming insights from secondary sources. 80% of time, a lot of money in reports, subscriptions, this, that, and the other. In the ideal setup, if we were to redesign a strategy function, we would allocate a huge amount of resources on primary interactions, going to the ground, meeting people, understanding firsthand how things are being done in India, overseas, globally, etc. And the compromise is always made in the conventional setup that you have a bunch of analysts reaming reports, gleaning insights, telling you a few interactions, 80-20 roughly. And that's how strategy is done today, right? Which is actually not ideal. The ideal world, if you imagine the ideal, and today AI enables you to imagine the ideal, it is, I would love to get an encapsulated view which forms my early hypothesis, which is all secondary research, but I want it on day one. And then day 1 to day 30, let's say I have a month to do my strategy for a new thing. I should be on the ground, meeting people, experts, domain guys, etc., etc. So this 1 day to 30 day is today the reverse almost, right? So I would completely redesign the strategy team and the way it functions, the metrics with which we measure the incentives of doing more secondary than primary than secondary, completely, right? And take a higher order bar on quality of output, etc., than we were used to. Now, this is something that can be done today, right? And you would have all experienced if you were to brainstorm on a very cutting edge technology. Let's say I took the example of solid state transformers. So you would have done it already with Perplexity or deep research within ChatGPT, right? You just brainstorm what are the new trends in transmission, what about solid state transformers, what are the alternatives, etc. You'll get a encapsulated thing, even a projection of what is to come, right? So this really completes your null hypothesis with which you can start the strategy exercise, right? So that's an example where I would completely redesign. I would get different tools, different org design, different capability set, less analysts, more higher level thinkers, more networkers in my strategy team than a bunch of analysts reading reports and repurposing and summarizing it for the leadership, right? So that's an example. Now let's go to marketing. This is obvious, isn't it? Basically, generative. The word generative itself says all forms of content, image, video, text. This completely needs to be redone right now, right? I have seen examples of companies which are unicorns doing hundreds of million in ARR, and the marketing team is one. There's a company which is marketing team of one, right? All newsletters, all content publishing, all thought leadership, etc., etc. Creative, right? It's unbelievable, right? And so the amount of leverage and the org design that you need to think about marketing the supporting companies, etc., that you work with, it needs to be completely redesigned, right? And that is today. If you are not doing it today, you are falling behind in that sense, right? Then let's go to operations, right? So now operations is very broad, and it again falls to whether it is core to you, or it is AI is core to you, or can change the core itself, or it is peripheral in that sense. So let's take things that are to be done today. Otherwise, you're falling behind, right? So I would say things like customer support, right? Completely redesigned, right? I tell you from my experience, we did 1/10 reduction in contact center, and pre-post measurements were similar, right? So a lot could be done. This is an industry which was already going towards you know, automation. A lot was already happening, so it's not all attributable to generative AI, maybe the conventional AI, right? But this momentum is continuing to go. So if there is a company which has a customer support, you can do a lot more with the with a new org design by deployment of AI, and be very cost efficient also. So that's definitely one area which falls into the category of complete redesign and starting today, right? Everything is possible today, right? And there are companies like Uniphore, etc., who are already doing great. You would see more and more such companies innovating, especially from India. Then, let's say you are an operations heavy company doing manufacturing. You have a shop floor. Now you have these workers. There's a lot of downtime or errors, etc., that happen because information is not available or the training is not adequate, and that is not changeable. It depends on the individual, the trainer, the setup, etc. But we have seen manufacturing companies redesign the way they do uh, operations management, the flow on the shop floor, etc., by making information available to um, uh, the technicians, right? So that they can just, if they're stuck, they can triangulate back what would have gone wrong and self-correct in a step-by-step manner without having to go to their supervisor, stopping the assembly line, and doing this, right? So huge impact can be had. I'm not going into safety, etc., but shop floor safety can be massively enhanced by just computer vision type AI, which can indicate whether people are following the right PPE, wearing the right headgear, etc., that is required in areas. So there is huge amount of change that is happening. The use of robotics, which is actually AI powered, we'll talk about it maybe later, is redesigning the way machine-human interaction happens with the advent of cobots, etc. You will see in India also factories are starting to use cobots, maybe piloting it, but 2 years and you will see it will become almost mainstream, right? So I think the amount of the way operations in such core areas can be done is completely being rethought. And again, and a thing where an early start today is you should start doing pilots of some sort if you're into that kind of operational domain in manufacturing and so on, right? Yeah, I think some things like let's say coding, right? This is a no-brainer. It has already transitioned, right? With and without Copilot, our first measurement was 50% more code lines of code, or repos being checked in. Whichever metric you took, it was almost 50% more. Now it might be 2x, right? So again, entire engineering org could be changed by doubling down on architecture, more product thought, more creative elements versus QA, code verification, the amount of hours you spend in code review, right? And then the programming itself, right? So that's the bulk of your engineering org today. and that could be completely rationalized, rethought, etc. So again, a case where if you're not doing it, do it now because you're falling behind. If you are not doing it, it's a competitive edge, right? So I think these are some examples. There's a long list. No matter what function there's something which is happening in either of these categories, right? I'll give an obvious example on the former category, which is sales, right? How do you interact with the consumer? If you have not changed over the past 6 months, it's a problem. Just go and get this change, right? The interface change is the first obvious change that every industry should be doing, right? And if you are in a company which is still using the same system or infrastructure to engage with consumers as they were doing earlier, whether upstream when you're selling or advertising to them, to downstream when they have converted and you're providing support, etc., engaging with the consumer in some way or the developer or whoever you're selling to in some way, this is the time. It's already late in a way, right? You should have started 6 months earlier, right? And you would see that these actions or decisiveness in this makes a big difference very quickly, right? Because this is an exponential change that people don't get intuitively. Exponential changes are very difficult to imagine, right? So if a couple of years, then you will see, oh my God, we are so behind as a company, right? And it will be very difficult to root cause it then because other people would have moved, and that this is a relative advantage that is there, right? So that's an example.
I think this is super helpful. And my takeaway from this is um, just using these capabilities for both internal and external facing functions within the company. It allows you obviously to do things much faster, right? Like from one of your examples, it allows you to like hyper personalize things, whether it's in terms of say the learning and education of a shop floor technician or marketing communication with a customer. It helps you drive significant amounts of progress on productivity and cost, right? Whether it's in terms of the size of your contact center or your engineering team. So I guess in terms of cost, in terms of specificity and personalization, and in terms of like speed of just how much you can do. It's like a bunch of like really useful examples from your side. And I think the most important thing you said at the very end was these changes are exponential. If you don't do them now, you will see them as having happened 2 years later, and then it will be too late to catch up at this point of time.